Okay, so yeah, this is how to work in higher education and take care of yourself. So before I start, I'm going to try my best to finish. I said this to some people already. I'm going to try my best to finish by 2. Thank you. Like, we started a bit late, obviously, because of the talk in the Great Hall. If you do need to leave early for whatever reason, that's absolutely fine. We are recording it, so if you want to catch the end, then you'll be able to do that. So yeah. So before I start, kind of a few housekeeping things, I guess. The main thing is that I'm going to ask you to talk to each other in this session, and it is a difficult topic, so be mindful of that. And also, I'm not an expert, okay? I'm not an expert in mental health, so if you need extra support on this kind of stuff, there are charities to support people who work in education. The Education Support Partnership offers free support to anyone working in education. Also, Swansea University has a counselling service. It's a bit more difficult to find on the new website, but I did, like, after about 5 or 10 minutes of searching, find that phone number, so you can ring them up and make an appointment. If you're a PhD student, you should get access to the student services as well. If you do student demonstrating, I bet you could get access to that if you kind of just, if you phoned up and say, I'm a demonstrator. Well, I doubt they would like turn you away. I would highly recommend those things. A lot of kind of managing well-being, stress, this kind of stuff, is having tools in your toolbox to help you. And one of those tools can be counselling, and it's very good. I know a lot of people have gone through it. Also, the NHS is actually, despite what you might hear, really good with this kind of stuff. You can go to your GP and get referred. Again, highly recommend that if you need to, and you shouldn't feel bad if you do. So yeah, and also the other thing to say is that, well, we'll say this in the context bit. So, well, okay, I'm going to start with this. This is something I want you to do on your own. If you haven't got paper and pens, there are paper there, or you can just type on your phone, or whatever you want to. I want you to think about this for 2 minutes, and it's better if you write it down. And what's going to happen is when I click go, there's going to be a progress bar that appears on the screen and then moves across, and you've got until the progress bar fills. Okay? So a reflective, like, to put our HEA fellowship hat on, like a reflective answer to this question, do I work too much? So there you go. So when the orange bar fills up, that's when your time's up. This is a tough topic. I don't like doing this. I've done this once before because Tashi convinced me to do it. And like, so as a kind of, like I already said, I'm not an expert. The other thing I'm going to say is I'm not going to be subtle, and I think kind of subtlety is the enemy of communication. I'm going to just say a bunch of stuff based on my experiences, based on some research, based on other things. And I'm not even sure that I agree with all of it. So you might not agree with all of it, but that's fine. It's about putting ideas in your head that, like, over the next 3 years, they start to kind of, you remember it, okay? So yeah, I mean, the context is things are bad. So in 2017, the Wellcome Trust and the Royal Society commissioned a report into the mental health situation in universities and in research. Their findings would not be shocking to any of us, but their findings were very bad. Higher education staff, not specifically academics, but higher education staff, have worse well-being than people in other jobs, which include the police, medics, and local authority staff. I'm not sure why they highlighted local authority staff. I'm not entirely sure who those people are. But like, that's, you know, that's not okay, right? Police and medics, you'd expect them to take their work home and to feel bad, right? The majority of staff in a university would describe their work as stressful. PhD students face similar challenges to other researchers and staff. And this, I think, is particularly worrying because if you're someone who did your undergrad, then you did a postgrad, and then you did your PhD, and then you joined academia, if you've not been outside of this system, you don't realise how odd this is, and that actually it's not like this everywhere else. And that's how these cultures stay like they do, right? Job security was a key issue. Like, I think there's so many people in this room that I know, like, don't know if they're going to have a job at Christmas this year. You know, it's bad. And researchers are on constant fixed-term contracts, and that isn't healthy in itself. Obviously, that's not unique to academia, but we need to, you know, be honest about this. And there's only one area where staff in higher education actually had any positive thing to say, and that was job control, or your kind of agency, so how much control you have over your job. And so this is bad, and this is just the way it is, and like, this is not good, and I've had a lot of people who have come to me with issues, and they've unloaded issues on me, and so what I've been trying to do with all that stuff that people are unloading on me is kind of put my energy into like a talk like this, and it's not okay. And the thing is, like, you can start researching this, and the first time I gave this talk, like, I got to the point where I started looking for other jobs, because I spent so much time looking at, like, what's actually happening. Like, if you actually stop, and we all just are kind of busy doing our day-to-day thing, but if you stop and look at what's going on in higher education in the UK, it is very, very bad and very worrying, and it's been going on for a long time. Like, this article was written in 2014, okay? That there's a culture of acceptance around mental health in academia. That's 5 years ago, and nothing has changed, okay? So, who do we blame? Okay, it's got to be someone's fault, right? So we could, and the last time I gave this talk I did, we could pick someone or something, some kind of organisation maybe, something that, like, we could pick something, blame it, design some kind of internal narrative that would support that feeling that this is the reason this is bad, go knock on someone's door and kind of unload to them, and that would feel good, okay? And I felt good, like, shouting in front of a whole bunch of early career researchers, and that, you know, made me feel good. But that probably isn't healthy, okay? What we could do is we could accept that actually there isn't anyone to blame, that there is no narrative, that it's all just kind of cosmic randomness, and the only thing that we really have any control over is ourselves and how we react to all the stuff that's happening to us. And like, this is currently where I am trying to get my kind of like internal monologue, right? And this is kind of what this talk is kind of about. It's not, there's going to be like, half the talk is going to be about practical things of how you can manage stress and how you can manage your time. But the other half is more about your relationship with your job. And that comes down to these kind of ideas. And I'm going to be, like, I have struggled for a long time trying to figure out why things are bad. And what I can't separate is like, some people will say, oh, it's because universities are trying to pretend that they're businesses and trying to be like businesses, and that's really bad. But is it that, or is it that the culture of academia, like, is that part of it? And you just can't separate these things out. And so, instead, I'm just kind of like going to say everything that I think is relevant. I don't know. Well, the question is, how do you look after yourself in an environment like this? Okay, I think, like, let's go with the second point, that we accept that we're in this environment, and it's like this. Well, how do we look after ourselves? And that's what the talk's about. So, what's your goal first? Right? We've all got career goals. My career goal for a very long time was to become a world leader in triangles. I genuinely like triangles, and I genuinely spent a long part of my life figuring out how to make triangles, and eventually I moved on to tetrahedra, which was very exciting. And that's what I wanted for a long time. I wanted to, you know, my name to be on papers and for people to think of, you know, triangles short. Okay, that was my goal. And that's everyone's goal, to become a world leader, or to, you know, maybe that's your goal. If most research-focused people would say that's their goal, is to be known in their field, right? Well, you're wrong. Right? Your first goal is to not burn out. Because if you burn out, you're not going to do your second goal. Right? Like, here's the situation we're in. Let's say we're all writing a grant application in this room. Okay? Many of us are. you know, I've heard numbers, and I don't know what the exact numbers is, but I think it's around 80% of those people will not get a grant. Okay, so the likelihood is, if I speak to one person and they tell me they're writing a grant, I can say, well, you're probably not going to get it. Just like statistically, okay? And so, if you burn out after writing that one grant application, you're not going to be able to write another one. And you're not going to be able to write another one. And you're not going to be able to write another one. And you need to do it again and again and again, and eventually you'll get one. But it doesn't happen in one process, right? We have a lot of rejection in whatever you're doing. It's not unique to academia, right? Is that things will fail, things will not work out, and so you need that capacity to be okay to deal with that. And if you're burning out and if you're working at the edge, you don't have that capacity. And so that's why it's important not to burn out. Reaching your goal, reaching that goal of becoming a world leader, the world's a big place, that's difficult. And reaching your goal and looking after yourself is even harder, but you can. I believe you can. I've done an all right job of it. I know lots of people who do a good job of it. But the weird thing about academia is that I feel a little bit embarrassed about that. And I might not say that very loudly, that I don't work crazy hours. Okay, because the culture is that we all work long hours, and if you're not doing that, you're not part of the group. So this is my kind of like confession, is that I work 7.5 hours roughly Monday to Friday. I rarely work on weekends. I have very strict boundaries that I just don't. Okay, that's time for me, that's time for my wife, that's time for my dog. And I tell my students this, right? Now, a lot of pressures come from teaching. I'm very open with my students that I work these hours, and that if you email me outside of this time, you're not going to get a reply. And they actually respect that, and I even had in my student feedback, students commenting on how they liked that, okay? That they actually liked the fact that I cared about well-being and wasn't doing all this extra stuff. And like, to me, what's important is why I do it, not necessarily how. You're all clever people, or you wouldn't be in this room today. You can figure out how to work in a healthy way. The important thing is kind of, there's a lot of things where you have to kind of convince your subconscious brain, your internal monologue, that that's what you should be doing. And that's where it's difficult. And that's where, like, I'm not perfect. I'm saying, like, all these things. I don't always follow my own advice and that kind of stuff. So I want to talk about why you should be doing this and try and, like, throw some stats, throw some science at you and some other things. And then, hopefully, if you understand the why, then the how is just something you figure out. Okay? So, I'm going to start with the why you should work healthy hours. So the first part is that, and this is going back to this idea of academic culture that I was talking about. Unhealthy working hours is making academia non-inclusive. We like to talk about how we're becoming more inclusive, and we say we're winning these inclusivity awards, but in reality, that's not the message that we're getting at all. So, like, I see lots of people glorifying working these kind of crazy hours. You see the tweets all the time, like, or at least I do, of I'm sitting here with a glass of wine, writing a grant proposal, or marking these scripts at like 10 o'clock on a Friday. And that's like a dangerous thing to be public, like to be telling people and like almost like taking a picture of it and making a point of showing people that you're doing this. It generates this false message that you need to be working like this to succeed. What if you've got students or people who are researching under you who have slight issues with mental health and they see that you're working at 10 o'clock on a Friday? They might spend the next 6 months working every weekend just to get up to your standards. Like, we need to be careful about that kind of stuff. And it immediately makes the profession unwelcoming to a huge number of people that would help counter this kind of culture. So be mindful of that. I've had two undergraduate students, who I thought they were really good, and I said to them a couple of years ago, I said, look, you should stay and do a PhD. I think you're great. And I remember one, she said to me, well, no, definitely not. Like, lecturers are emailing me at 2 a.m. There's no way I want to be involved in universities. And like, she's right. That's the, like, I couldn't argue with that. She was saying that that's what happened, so she left. And I think she's doing quite well. I think she sent me an email like last year. She's got like a job in industry and she's happy. And it's like, yes, you can love your work, but you can also be a responsible human being. And that means thinking, being mindful about this kind of stuff. So you should want to work healthy hours because of that kind of stuff. A more practical reason is that working more hours is less productive. There is so much research that shows this is the case. Creatively and industrially, you will perform worse when you are tired. And you're not special. Okay? Research, like, unless you are this massive outlier, you are not working as well when you are working more hours. It's interesting because work addiction is a real thing. It's a real thing that I don't really know much about, and I don't know how to diagnose, and I certainly don't know how to help you. But it's a real condition. And like, we often think about if someone is addicted to alcohol, that's going to impact their work in a negative way. But also, if you're addicted to work, that will impact your work in a negative way. Be mindful of what you're doing and when you're spending time. And like, I've put some links there. These are mainly to blog posts or to like, news articles, but they link to scientific research on this. And some things are, productivity falls off a cliff after 55 hours, so much so that if you work 70 hours, you're doing nothing with 15 of those hours in the equivalent kind of productivity. And that's from a group at Stanford. What they found is working 40 hours a week benefits no one. There's an effect as well on like happiness, but I don't know how exactly you define happiness, and I think it's a very difficult thing to define. But University of Warwick showed that happiness led to a 12% spike in productivity, while people who were unhappy were working 10% less productive. So you've got that kind of like a bigger change than you think. And the thing that is really interesting is that all the research that I read showed this effect, is that you might think, oh, my productivity is less, but I'm working more hours. Well, actually, your productivity is so much worse when you're working 60-hour weeks that you're doing less than someone who works a 40-hour week. That's how much of an effect it is. So reason 2, you should be working healthy hours, is because you'll get more work done. So, reason 3. When Tashi first started... Go on.
I don't know, can I ask questions?
No, I don't. Yeah. As I said, I'm not an expert. I'm going to get you to talk to each other. So the discussion, save that for talking to each other. So, reason 3. So this is kind of something Tashi told me to do. So he said, when he first told me to do this talk, he was like, "Got to be personal. Add some personal stories." So I put precisely 2 personal stories in the talk. This is the first personal story. So there's a moment in your life where it's the first moment that you realise you're an independent adult. Okay? For me, it might be when you buy your first house. It might be when you get your first car. For me, it was when I realised I owned my first jar of Nutella, and no one could tell me what to do with it. And so what I could do is I could get a piece of toast, I could put the knife in the Nutella, spread Nutella on it, and if there was a gap on the toast, I could put the knife back into the jar, get some more Nutella and spread it on, okay? And I would do this for years, okay? And then slowly I realised it was making me ill. And then what I noticed was, on the side of the jar, actually probably more recently when like people started caring about health and stuff, I guess, they put like a little serving suggestion in the jar. So it was a spoon and some Nutella, and it was like 1 teaspoon of Nutella. So I thought, okay, I'll give it a try. And so I started putting 1 teaspoon on. And as soon as you put 1 teaspoon on, I can't go back into the jar, so I need to spread this out properly on my toast. And eventually you start to realise, the bread adds something to this as well. I can taste the bread now. And then you start to think, what kind of bread would go well with this? So my point is, if I know I can keep going back into the jar of Nutella, I'm going to keep going back into the jar of Nutella. And that's how you should treat your time. If you're okay, if you know that I'm okay working, I can work Saturday, I can work Sunday, I can work this evening, you're never going to find a way of being more productive in the week. Because you know I can just do it on Saturday. And I think that's an important thing. And then it's about respecting your own time as well. It's valuing your own time. And the thing is, if you don't value your time in this way, a lot of us get to the point in our career where we end up having people who we are line managers for. And if we're not respecting our own time, we're certainly not going to respect their time. And I remember being a postdoc somewhere, and I remember a PI coming in and shouting at a postdoc for not working more than 8 hours a day, when that postdoc was being made redundant like a week later. I mean, it was ridiculous, okay? Like the focus there was on the output of the grant that they submitted, and they put the grant, they were giving the advice that, only ask for 2 years because, if you ask for 3 years, that's much less likely going to get funded. And so they promised 3 years of work in a 2-year grant, and so that ended up adding this pressure. And there's obviously lots of complex stuff going on there, but there's still that feeling of there wasn't a respect for his time. And burnout doesn't happen overnight. Like, we know the next few weeks, the nature of any job that involves teaching is you're going to have parts of the job where you have lots of work, right, when there's marking. And you're going to have to. I said, I didn't say I never worked weekends, I said I rarely worked weekends. Because there are times where you just have to get the job done. If it's like a bulk, here's like a bunch of work. And once in a while, that's okay. It's when it happens regularly, it's when you realise you're not exercising anymore, you're not taking time to eat properly, and you're not spending time with your friends. That's when burnout happens. It'll creep up on you, you'll stop caring about work, and it will be too late. So it's about thinking about that respect of your own time and other people's time. So now I want you to kind of talk to each other. So just because Matt asked for a question, I don't really want to do questions because this is something that I'm very uncomfortable talking about and I'm not an expert in. Okay, so this is for you to kind of talk to each other about. And I think that gives the wrong impression. I'm not an academic giving a talk about triangles, right? So, talk to each other and help each other, support each other. So, we'll also need people to sign in. So I'll hand around some forms.
At the start.
Thanks, yeah. But I want you to talk to some people about the thing that you wrote at the start and anything else you want to talk about. Wherever the conversation goes is the right place for it to go. But I would like you to talk to each other. I don't mind if you want to talk to people you know or people you don't know. But just 5 minutes talking about what's happened so far. Part 2, a little less difficult. This one is how to how to work healthy hours. Okay. So hopefully, you can kind of try and, or you're kind of semi-convinced that, or maybe in the next few years you'll be convinced that this is a good idea. So then, how do you do it, right? And then this is what this is about. So some things. This is partly things I do myself, partly things that I'm that I've just read books and stuff. So I'll show you some books at the end that I suggest. So these are going to be 3 tips, because I think more than 3 things is too much, and then you'll have a chance to kind of talk to each other about certain tips. So tip 1, which is a strange one, that it doesn't almost sound like a tip, is to be value-driven rather than goal-driven, which I'll explain to you in a minute. So this is personal story number 2, Tashi. So I have a games company out of work, and we've released 2 games so far. The first game went pretty well for me, and allowed me to make another one. So this one is our second game that was more recent, called Cycle 28. And we set ourselves the goal of selling enough copies to make money, right? That was the goal, is to sell lots of copies. And the way you do that now is that Steam, which is the main place you buy games from on the PC, your aim is we need to be on new and trending at the when we launch. Okay, if we're on new and trending, then more people see your game, which means more people buy it, which means the algorithm gods kind of look down upon you and give you money, right? That's how it works. And so this was the goal that we set ourselves. Now, we're 2 people. We didn't have any kind of marketing budget. Like, we spent money on artists and we spent money on musicians, but that was it. That was the whole budget. The rest then was just our time. And we're both academics. So, like, our time was, like, you know, weekends and evenings. So that was our goal, right? We set a goal of, like, we need to be on this front page. And we thought the way to do that was like, oh man, we need people to know about this, because we need lots of people to see the game and buy it straight away so we get on New and Popular. We need to, you know, like, I hate to say it, but like, we were kind of thinking, oh, we need to go viral, this kind of stuff, right? Which is the stupid thing to say and the stupid thing to aim to do. So what we did, we thought, right, we need lots of eyes on this. So Matt, again, was like, earlier you gave a talk about this kind of like, this, what was that thing called, where you had the funnel?
Yeah, we call it the funnel.
It's the funnel,
the
yeah.
sausage diagram, but
yeah.
that's not so politically correct. Right?
Mm-hmm. But so this idea, if you came to Matt's talk earlier, which some people did, you'll recognise this idea of having a funnel, where at the start of the funnel, you try and get loads of people looking at something. And you expect, as you come down this funnel, that people are going to drop off everywhere until like 0.01% of the people that were at the start buy your game. Okay? So the idea is you try and get as many eyes on this as possible. So we thought, well, the way to do that is to create content, and like create content and put content on the internet and put it on YouTube. So what we did was we did weekly videos of us playing the game, weekly videos of us talking about how we were designing the game, weekly, well, not weekly, but every so often we do a live stream, probably on a Saturday, of us playing the game before it was out. Every week we played a game that was kind of like our game, but not really our game, and would post that on YouTube as well. We post blog posts, and like I looked this morning to see how often we were doing that. We were doing like one a week, and we tried to kind of link these things together to save ourselves work, but we were doing all that. We even took a video of me making coffee the morning of release, okay, and posted that on. And you know, we thought, look, you know, people are watching our stuff, people are doing all this, you know, people are interested. It's going to go really well. It's going to, you know, people were telling us, early reviews were coming in. It was like, oh yeah, we love it. It's really good. And you know, we're really, and well, it flopped, right? Oh, we also made 3 trailers. And making a trailer, if you've done any kind of video editing, you know it takes a long time. But then editing a video based on gameplay that you took, you have to record the gameplay, you have to do it. It's a lot of stuff. So we were doing all this, and it didn't work. Like, we launched our game at a certain time of day that maybe a year ago would have been the right time of day to launch, but now there's so many games coming out every day now. We were on the front page for 1 hour. 1 hour was our shot, was how much time we had to get any kind of momentum. And the time because we thought normally you're on the store page for at least 12 hours. So the old advice was, you go on like 2 o'clock in the morning in US time, and then by the time everyone's waking up, you're kind of hitting your peak, and then it all, you know, happy money. But it wasn't at all. We were there an hour, and the US were asleep. So that was it. And that was bad, and that was crushing, and it was like it was this weird feeling, like awful feeling, right? It was terrible. But the problem there was, we set a goal, like our goal was to sell this many copies and like to be on the front page. A goal that we actually had no real control over. It's not something we could really influence. Like, we felt like we could, but like the stuff we were doing, like, you know, the amount of people viewing these videos was so tiny compared to the number that we needed to be on that front page. And what we were quite down on that, and like, you know, it affected, you know, it was like, it was not good. And what we missed was that almost all the reviews are positive. It's got like a 97-point-something% positive review score on Steam, which is hard to get. And that, you know, people really liked it. We've now released it on Nintendo Switch, and people like are giving us good reviews on there. Like, that kind of stuff, like, is positive. And like, I remember people posting videos, and people email me and say like they really enjoyed it and they play it with their kid and it's really nice. And that's the stuff that actually really matters. And that's the stuff we can control by making a good game. And so now the kind of approach that we're taking with our next game is like, well, we can't control this other stuff. Like, we can try our best to kind of make things the right way, that if in the case that we're lucky enough to get all this traffic without having a budget to pour into, like, the way you actually do this, you put lots of money into Facebook ads or something, but you need to then take the loan out and it gets serious and risky. So yeah, and that's not what we're doing. We're kind of like low budget, money in, money out, like just about the same. But yeah, and we're taking a different approach, and it's much more positive. Like, it reminds me of, like, we have our, academics will know this, like, we have these key performance indicators, like I think 10, 11, 12, that it seems like a lot of these, like, measures that measure us as an academic, okay? And, like, when you actually think about it, and I thought about this recently because I had my interim PDR, is that, like, I sat down with my line manager and was like, well, that was the one thing I needed to improve, but I can't control that thing. And it was, the one thing was number of PhD students. And like, I had a PhD student who'd agreed, like, we'd applied for a scholarship together, we got the scholarship, like, all the stuff I could control had gone well, but they got offered a place from Bristol. And so they took that place. And actually, like, I know that person, and that PhD is going to be much better for him. And so, like, my values are, like, I supported him through a process, and I encouraged him to apply for all sorts of things, because I thought, well, I know how hard it is to get a scholarship, so I want you to apply for everything. Don't just put all your eggs in my basket, because you might not get it. So there's a conflict there between what my values are and what, like, the measures that I'm supposed to measure myself as a good academic are. And I think that this actually, like, is a core to a lot of the issues people have in academia with kind of mental health. It's kind of like how you're valuing yourself based on things that really you have very little control over. Like what we said about grant applications. I mean, I don't give money to cancer charities because I know people who sit on the panels for cancer charity grants. And I know how those things go. And it's not based on how good the science is, okay? Stuff happens. And I don't think it's, like, malicious. It's just the reality is, if you see a grant from someone you know, you can't erase the fact that you know that person, right? Like, these things are going to have an impact, and that's something you can't control. The first job interview I went for was as a physics teacher, and I did the interview, and I thought, I nailed this interview, it was really good. And I had to commute all the way across the UK. I was living in Ipswich, and the interview was in Malvern, which is kind of in Gloucester somewhere there. And I was on a train, like on a London commuter train, and like packed in like sardines. And the head teacher phoned me up and was like, Sean, you did really well. Like, nothing you could have done, the other candidate could speak French. And I was like, what? And it turns out the school I applied for was back when I was a teacher. They had a thing in England where every school was a specialist school in something. And it was hilarious because by the time that scheme ended, every school was a specialist in every area. So you ended up just everything being a specialist everything. So the school I applied for was specialist languages school. So the fact this other teacher could speak French, like, she got the job. And, like, for the head teacher, that was the right decision. But at the time, I was like, I need a job, I'm going to not have a job. But, like, it's just, that's out of my control, I can't do anything about that. So what we were doing here as well, is we were trying to control something that we couldn't. And we were putting a huge amount of energy into that. Huge amount of energy. Like, is that you when you're writing a grant application? Like, really perfecting it, line by line, like, is that how much is, I mean, I do it, I still do it, and I'm still reading a grant application I'm currently doing at the moment, I'm going to read it again and again and again. But, like, be mindful of that, right? How much, is that a good way of doing things? Should we, and this is what the tip used to be, but then I kind of thought maybe this, is, like, should we be thinking about failing fast? Like, the more you fail, like, failing is learning, and so, like, fail lots, and then you'll learn quickly. Like, it's a really cliche thing, right? It's like, but I think there's value in it. And the other thing is, like, if you want to get all your work done and you want to be productive, like, have something personally that you really care about, some kind of value, and let that drive you. Because if you have something that really matters to you, that will push you forward, and you'll be motivated to do stuff. And those values don't always align with, like, things like KPIs and stuff, which, and I'm not saying I think KPIs are bad, like, we've got these jobs, and we signed up for these jobs, and that's kind of what we need to do, but you can also, have those, it's about whether you see that as defining your self-worth, and all you get into weird kind of, like, things. So, tip 2 is, again, really obvious one, but a lot of things hopefully are kind of obvious, but it's something that when you hear other people saying it to you, maybe you kind of believe it. So, Game of Thrones quote, "Every time I'm faced with a decision, I close my eyes, see the same picture. Whenever I consider an action, I ask myself, will this action help to make this picture a reality? Pull out of my mind and into the world, and I only act if the answer is yes." That is like focused, absolute focus. Like if you have an opportunity to do something, is that going to benefit, like your big goal, is that going to help you? So you probably say yes too much. I think this is a bit extreme, by the way. I'm not like saying you should always, there's kind of almost selfishness to that, but with reason. What I would say is you need to think about something before you immediately say yes. I think there is, like, lots of academics do it. It seems to be a thing. I'm sure it's not just academics. I'm sure it's like lots of people everywhere. For me, my weakness is that I find that I will start a project and it will go so far and there'll be some roadblock that comes up. And like something will happen and I'll have to wait. And the amount of time I have to wait might be months. And so I'm like, maybe I could take something else on. And then I say yes to something else, and you start another project, and then suddenly you've got all these projects in parallel, and then like teaching finishes, and everyone has time to do the thing they said they were going to do, and suddenly everyone emails you once and says, like, I'm ready, and you've got 10 people that you're trying to figure out. So things to watch out for, like you should, question the value of whatever you're going to do to yourself, I guess. Things like when people tell you something is a great opportunity before they tell you what it is usually a warning sign. It'll look great on your CV, just means I'm not going to pay you. We really think, the classic one for me is, we really think you would be valuable to this application a week or 2 weeks before the deadline. Because what that means is they did an internal, like if they're writing a grant application and maybe they did a peer review internally and it'd be really good for a computer scientist, and then you get a phone call, and that like I love multidisciplinary stuff and I do lots of stuff with people around the university, but I do it with people who contacted me before they wrote the application, and that's when like we're really all contributing, and it's like what Matt was saying earlier about collaborators from industry. Talk to them at the start, not like, oh, we could probably use someone who works in banks and same at the end. So like have some confidence. If like how to do that, like something you can say is like I simply don't have the capacity to do that. Something I like doing, or something lucky from doing Crucible, is I know lots of people in different areas. So if someone emails me, I had an email from someone the other day who wanted to do like a political based game, and saw that I've got a games company, I'll ask Sean, maybe he could do something. And I said, well, actually, I can't take that on. I've got too many projects going on. That does sound interesting. It does sound like something I would do. But why don't you contact this person, this person, or this person? Because they can maybe do it. And it makes, like, if that's something, like, I can't get past that guilt. I have, like, it is a character flaw of, like, saying, I want to help everyone that comes and asks for help. But, like, at some point, you have to say no. And like one way I ease that feeling is I try and find alternatives for people, and then I can be like, okay, good. So tip number 3 is about having a system. So a system being a way of managing your time. I'm always surprised when I hear that some people don't have a system, and I don't understand how they function. This is a particularly good system that I've been using, and I know lots of other people around the university have been using, and lots of our students started using because I told them to start using it, and they tend to like it. It's called Getting Things Done. Basically the way it works is, the key idea of this is, like I've been saying before, you've got your subconscious narrative brain that will be saying things to you, and you need to con your brain into, well not actually, you need to make your subconscious believe that you've got stuff, you're in handle of stuff. If you've ever kind of laid in bed at night, kind of with something that you need to do going around in your head, there's a good chance the reason that's going around in your head is because your brain is thinking, oh, this isn't written down anywhere, I need to keep remembering to do this, so I'm going to keep saying it and saying it and saying it and saying it and saying it. And this system, Getting Things Done, by David Allen, like you can Google it, like you'll find lots of information. I made a short video about how to do it, but if you just put Getting Things Done into YouTube, you'll find something, right? You don't have to watch my video, but if you do subscribe. The way it works is very simple, right? It's all about, every time something comes into the page, you write it down. Like, I use Trello, which is an application that it works well on, but you can use a piece of paper, right? The advantage of using Trello is, like, I've got it on my phone, I've got it on my computer, and it's free. And it's really, I explain it quite quickly, is every time something comes into your head that you need to do, you put it in your inbox, okay? And then, every day, the first thing I do when I get into work, I don't check my emails, I open up my Trello board, and I look at my inbox, and I clear it. And what I do is I will either put a job in today, and I'm limiting my today to 5 things. I might add more things later in the day, but I'm going to put, there's only ever going to be 5 things in my today list, which is what I do today. And 5 is because most people can remember about 5 things, it turns out. Okay? Anything that doesn't go in today will go into the next action, which means something I'm not going to do today, but I am going to do it. And then every day I will be looking in my next actions and thinking, right, okay, that's something I can do today. I then have another list, which is waiting, where things go into that when I'm waiting for a reply from someone else. So my brain knows I've got a handle on it, my brain understands that I'm keeping track of this, but it's not something I need to worry about yet, so it's on waiting. Then there's like, I don't use these ones very much, but they're off the edge. There's like someday, which are these kind of like, these ideas you have that kind of pop into your head and like, I should probably learn how to do machine learning or something, right? And you put that, I should learn TensorFlow, and you put that into someday, and then you probably never do it. But you don't feel bad about it because you've got it there, you know, yeah, I'm going to, someday I'll do that. And that goes there. Now, the first time I set this up, I spent an entire day doing nothing but this. And that was valuable time, right, that was contributing to my work and contributing to my job, because since doing this, I genuinely don't lay in bed at night thinking about work. Like, it took about a month for it to really work, and you have to do it. Like, I know some people who say, I tried it, it didn't work, and then I talk to them, they're like, well, you're not actually doing it. Like, you've half done it, and then you've kind of done a different thing. So I do, like, strongly, highly recommend, like, I know, again, cliches like life-changing and everything, but I do think that's a positive thing. So, I'm going to play this video. Actually, I'm not going to play that because we're kind of short on time. So I'm going to leave, like, what I'm going to do is the bit where you talk about your own tips. If people are able to stay a bit longer, that's for you to decide and you can talk to each other. But if people who want to leave, like, there's a last thing I want to talk about, which is what to do if none of this works. Okay? So, what if this doesn't work? You need to remember that you're good enough to get another job. Is that to get this far, you're good at what you do, and you could be good at something else. And let me zero this a second. So there's a thing going on in the games industry at the moment, which is, I don't know how many people, you might, if you're on Twitter and you follow certain people, you know about this. There's this thing called crunch, which is when it comes to the point where a game is close to being released, in fact now it's happening for much longer, is that developers will be told, oh, you're working all weekend, and you're working, 12-hour days, and it will be enforced, and they will have to work, they have to be there in the office, and so what will happen is, managers will go around, and if they don't see people there, they will make sure they're not on the credit list for the game. And if you don't get credit on a game, you can't then put that in your CV, you can't say, well, I worked on Grand Theft Auto. Right? So it's hot, it's nasty stuff. And people are starting to leave, because they don't want to deal with that anymore. And you would think maybe that some of them regret leaving, but people who are interviewed haven't. So here's a quote. So truthfully, I don't love my work anymore, but my life has been so much more comfortable. Ultimately, leaving the games industry was the right choice. It's happening to PhD students as well. So I found this article. So this is about professor in waiting to florists, PhDs who are leaving and getting unconventional jobs. So some quotes from the article. When I look back, it was just one big stressful guilt trip. and she's a floral designer and has her own flower business. I thought when I started that there was absolutely no way that I would not finish, but now I'm a very proud PhD dropout, proud and happy. This guy is a carpenter now. Carpentry has been great because it's cerebral in its own way. A year later, I realised the joy of reading had come back, so a year after leaving. Because it had slowly been eroded through the pressure to produce. Life is a whole lot more than a PhD, that's for sure. I'm not suggesting that you quit. What I'm suggesting is that you realise that you could, and it would be okay. Because more than the people who I talk to who are struggling and continue to be unhappy feel trapped. And if you get to the stage where you think, well, do you know what, I could go get another job, then you realise, well, if I can go get another job, well, I'm going to start looking after myself in this job. Because who cares, I can go get another job. Then you start looking after yourself, and you start realising, oh, I'm doing as much, actually this is all working, and then you can stay in this job and you'll be okay. But it's important not to feel trapped, right? And I think that's a really important thing to think about, is that you can do other things. I mean, I left teaching because of a lot of the things we talked about today. I went to, it was very hard, I felt unsafe, and I ended up realising that it was I'm not going to be able to deal with this my entire life. So I went to the PhD. Going through that experience is probably why I'm very strict and have very strict boundaries now, is that I'm not prepared to do that again to myself and to my wife and to my dog. That's meant to be kind of a positive, empowering thing. Not oh man, we should quit, it's horrible. But be empowered. I really enjoy my job and I like working here and I love coming to work. But that comes from kind of this feeling of, I know I'm not trapped here, so I can look after myself while I'm here. Anyway. Okay, so some kind of, a few things about people I stole stuff from. So Tanya Short did a talk about this kind of stuff, but in the games industry, which is, when I watched her talk, I was like, I need to make a talk like this for academia. Mark Reed is great, follow him on Twitter. Tanya as well, actually. She does, if you're interested in procedural generation, she does lots of stuff to do with procedurally generated art and procedurally generated games, which is very interesting, and her work is interesting. She's not an academic. Mark Reed, The Productive Researcher, is a great book. Has anyone read it? Okay, cool. Yeah, it's really, really good. There's a whole chapter in there on how to write a literature review in a week, which is really powerful. I give it to my PhD students, or at least I show them the book, and it's a very strict. It's a very kind of here's the template of how to do it, and it works really well. It really helped me, and a lot of the stuff I talked about actually are kind of from his. What he did was he went to lots of other really successful academics around the world, and he tried to kind of come up with what are the key things that these people have in common. And it was a lot about this stuff about being driven by really strong values, and rather than being very focused on targets and metrics and all that sort of stuff. So I highly recommend that. And the last book someone bought me for my birthday 2 weeks ago. It's weird, it's a nice read. It's a short read. After the first few pages, you're yeah, I get it. You're going to swear all through this book. But it's actually it's good. I would recommend it. For me, it was just a way of being oh yeah, okay, other people think in the way that I'm thinking, so maybe I'm okay thinking in the way I'm thinking. It's that kind of stuff. Yeah. So thanks to Ari who organised the food and everything, and yeah. So I'll leave you to kind of talk to each other. I'm going to be doing stuff. I don't know. But yeah, thank you.